Here we go, hot off the press, my review of the September 23 AAA exam. Now, the usual caveat, I haven't seen the exam paper. This is all been reported to me by my own students and also by my wider network on LinkedIn. So I haven't seen the paper yet, but this is what I've been told. Now, overall, a very fair paper. There were 3 variants of the exam, and all 3 were pretty similar. Pretty similar questions came up, similar question styles. So no matter which variant you got a very similar exam experience. And there were lots of mainstream topics that were tested, things that are regularly tested in AAA. There weren't very many unusual requirements. And I don't think there was any specific UK question. Now, last sitting, there was a specific UK question. And that tends to happen once every 3 to 5 years, right? So it didn't come up again, and that's kind of what I was expecting to see. The other thing that pleased me about the exam, apart from it being a very consistent set of questions, well, 2 more things that pleased me. One, there weren't many tech issues. ACCA getting their game together with the remote invigilation. And the second thing that pleased me is loads of the stuff that I tipped came up. Business risks was tested really heavily, and I told you to watch out for that. And also financial reporting. There was loads of it in this exam. And again, that was something I headlined for you to watch out for. There was also lots of quality management. And that was another thing that I tipped. And, well, I've been tipping fraud for ages, and fraud came up in this one. Actually, the fraud question on quantifying the extent of a fraud, procedures around a fraud, is almost identical to one of the questions that was on my mock. And so my students were well prepared for that one. Right, let's get into the individual questions then. So starting with question 1, which is our usual 50-mark case study question. Now, all 3 questions here were really similar. They all started with business risks for 10 marks. But the first variant was a fashion retailer, an unlisted fashion retailer. And that actually was a theme throughout Section A. All 3 variants were unlisted companies. Now, in this question 1, materiality was based on PBT for your risks of material misstatement in Part B. Now, that's the normal way that we calculate materiality, so that's what we're kind of expecting to see. The slight twist in this question 1 is that the procedures part in Part C focused on data analytics and asked you for procedures around inventory, but specifically you had to use data analytics for those. And again, I was pleased to see this because that is the number 1 current issue that I was flagging to my students that we went through in detail before the exam. So any of my students who got that variant were very well prepared. And there was a standard ethics requirement at the end. The second variant of question 1 was again an unlisted company called Hammer. This one was a DIY product store for home improvements and that sort of thing. And again, exactly the same format as the other variant for Section A, in that it started with 10 marks on business risks, it had 16 marks on risks of material misstatement, but the twist in this one is that materiality was based on revenue, not PBT. Slightly unusual. And again, that is something I flagged to my students that the examiner has been doing recently. And so hopefully anyone who was listening to that advice didn't get thrown by that slight twist. And we had standard procedures around CapEx and ethics and actions as our Part D. Again, a standard question 1. And that typical style of question 1 also continued into the third variant of the exam. This one was called Grafton, a building supplies group. Again, unlisted. And there were group issues in this one. So around that's one of the current issues, again, that I've been flagging for people to watch out for. Again, it was business risks. Every variant, business risks. And this one in Part B had audit risks rather than risks of material misstatement. So that would have included detection risks as well. Now, the twist in this one, again, was that materiality was based on revenue. Unusual, normally it's PBT, but you've got to be ready for anything. And again, procedures around CapEx, just like in the second variant, and the Part D of the question was a standard ethics requirement. Then moving into Section B, the reporting question. So 25 marks on reporting, and it wasn't 25 marks on reporting. The 2 variants of this question that most of my students seem to report on, both of them were very similar. They actually were quality management questions. 16 marks on quality management, matters to consider and evidence that should be on the file, and a little 4 marker at the end on the impact on the audit report or the impact on the audit opinion. So very little on actual reporting in those 2 main variants of the exam. Now, I have been told by 1 or 2 students that there was also another variant here that covered critically evaluating an audit report, but I haven't got enough detail on that one to be able to tell you any more about it. Then the non-reporting question, again, this theme of consistency was showing throughout the exam here. There were 3 variants for this question. Sorry, that's 3, isn't it? Not 4. But 2 of them were very similar. 2 of them started with acceptance for the first part of the question. Should we take on this work? And then went on to another part. The first variant was fraud, quantifying a fraud. And that question is almost identical to what came up in my mock. So I was very happy to see that. The other variant that had acceptance, the second part of it was a due diligence engagement, and you had to suggest procedures around auditing or doing due diligence on warranties. And that's something the examiner quite likes to do. Ask you to suggest procedures around something a bit unusual so that you can't rote learn and you have to run with what's in the scenario. That approach of being able to problem solve with the scenario would have been really important in both that fraud question and also in that warranties question. The other Section B question was on quality management, a big question on quality management where you had to be looking at procedures that had already been done and work that had already been done on a cash flow forecast. Again, a standard requirement, and actually looking at cash flow forecasts is something we covered in my mock exams. So again, that's something that my students were well prepared for. So overall, I thought this was a really fair exam. There was nothing too weird in it. No question that you would have thought, oh, if I have not practiced, I won't know how to do it. But as always, very time pressured. A lot of students reported that to me. And there was lots and lots of heavy scenario information, which meant that, you had to really have good exam technique to be able to cope with these set of questions. And also lots of financial reporting, particularly in question 1 around the ROMs and the audit risks. But a decent set of questions. So hopefully the exam went well for you. And you're now going to sit back and relax as you wait for results. I mean, no one does that, do they? Everyone has a nervous wait. But my advice is forget about it now. Like, the exam is done. Give yourself a few weeks to just digest and, well, if you're not doing any other exams, just have a break and then pick this up in October. And if you need any advice when it comes to results day, get in touch. I'm here to help.